Hey, how's everyone doing today? I'm Esh, and thanks for tuning into my channel. It's been a while since I put out some content besides just doing laps in the southeast with my Turbo VR6, but I got something special for you today. So earlier this spring, I was given an amazing opportunity to be on the pit crew for an endurance race team, and I've been traveling the country going to races all year. So in this video, we're going to break down some behind-the-scenes footage of Hammer Motorsports prepping their three Audi RS3 TCR cars for the World Racing League's 14-hour endurance race at Daytona. I'm going to show you and talk you through the level of preparation required every night to flip these cars for the next day, as well as break down some pit stops during the race and highlight the crew in these amazing cars. So grab a beer, relax, and let's talk about what it takes to keep these cars going on race day. So the typical format for a race is a Friday high-performance driving experience type day that has a few sessions that are set aside just to qualify for Saturday's race. So this, of course, is going to determine what your starting position is for the race. Now, usually there's a race on Saturday and a race on Sunday. However, here at Daytona, we're looking at just a Friday session and then a Saturday 14-hour race. So the number one car that you're looking at here was giving us a small headache with an overboost code. So Corey's up top and he's working on cutting and making a stubby wrench. And what he's trying to do is get that between the firewall and the wastegate adjusting rod. And he's going to try and back that off just a couple turns to see if we can get that code to drop out of the system. Down below, Matt's working on a worn wheel bearing that he discovered upon the post-Friday inspection. And he's swapping out the bearing and the hub assembly. And he's also going to put on new rotors and pads. These AP calipers that are on the Audis are amazing. It's a 2-bolt type design to change pads. You take out the 2 hex bolts from the side, and then the pad retainers just fall out. So then the pads are front loaded into the calipers, and they just float in there, and it really makes changing them quick and easy. And here's Sterling assembling those brake rotors for us with the 2-piece hat and rotor design. So the car's up on the air jacks right now to give us a little bit of room to work. I'll show you an action shot of those during a pit stop here a little later. So going back to what I was saying on those AP calipers, here's a really good close-up of those getting loaded with some fresh pads here. So Corey's just putting the caliper back on, and you're going to see him bolt the caliper on with the old pad in there, and then takes a pry bar and pushes the pistons back into the caliper to get them to retract fully. Because if you look at the size of these pads, these G-Lock pads, when they're brand new, they're like an inch thick on each side. I mean, these are ridiculously big brake pads, but that's what you need when you're going to be running for, up to 14 hours at a time. So you'll see him pry those back, push the pistons back in the caliper, then he unloads the retainer bolts, slides that new front-loaded brake pad in, and then bolts it back down, and it's ready to go. Okay. Thank you.
I just don't want to pull it out. I gotta go tell these guys.
So the last part of the brake job is to flush the brakes. So you're asking a whole lot of the hydraulic fluid when you put that much heat into it over that amount of time. So at the end of each day, when all the brakes are done, we go through and we bleed them really well to make sure that we get any air bubbles, and of course just push fresh fluid out to each caliper. So these brakes are pretty neat. They are independent circuits for the front and the rear, completely independent. So you have a reservoir and master cylinder for front and rear, and they're tied together with a balance bar. So this balance bar is threaded and will adjust the amount of preload or travel for the front and the rear, and that's how you adjust the bias of the brakes. So that's adjustable by the driver on the right-hand console with a knob, and you turn it one way to bias them more to the front, turn it the other way, and it'll adjust that balance bar, and of course bias them more to the rear then. There's a whole lot more involved than I originally thought when I got started in this sport as far as setting up. So while the cars were getting flipped for the next day, we overheard on the PA system that we were all right to go ahead and start setting up our pit spots. So here's a quick shot of Sterling, Matt, Josue, Brett, and myself just getting our spot locked down and ready for the next morning. Up top in the pit box are the crew chiefs. So they're dialed into the cars and they're examining the telemetry live as it comes in. And they're analyzing and interpreting everything from just coolant and oil temps to calculating the current fuel consumption and planning the next pit stop many laps down the road. So the data coming in can also help them detect a small problem now that could compound into a larger one down the road. So, for example, let's say a driver had a slight off track excursion. They may have packed some grass into the inlet for the radiator, and that small temperature rise that they're seeing in the live data gives them a heads up that they may need to bring the car in now and just have the intake blown out quick rather than causing some damage down the road and not seeing that, or maybe risking the driver not seeing it. So, having that live data streaming in lets them concentrate on that and relay the information to the driver in the car over the radio. And of course, in the modern age, you can even stream this data directly to a cell phone. I remember asking Alex during one race for some data points, and he was able to just pull his cell phone out, flip it open, and show me exactly what was going on with the car at that point. Let's get into some racing action now. We're going to take a look at what goes on when a car comes in for fuel and a driver change. So going over the wall here is Fuel Team 2, which is arguably the best fuel team in the history of WRL racing. So Sterling's over the wall here, and he's slamming jugs into the car. But at the same time, we got Alex and Corey up front doing a driver change. Now, stuff that's getting thrown over the wall is foam padding. The seat in the car is a little bit oversized, so to help push the driver forward or lift them up or lock them in the seat a little bit tighter, they may have their own pieces of foam that they'll kind of hold on to for a driver change, and then they'll wedge that in there for them as they get in the car. Waiting patiently on the wall there is Richie. He can only have so many people over the wall at a time when fuel's getting put in the car. So he's just sitting there waiting for that last jug to pop off and come back over the wall. And then he goes over and he's looking the car over to see if anything's wrong with it. And then he's also doing a little bit of a repair there on the front left fender. So what happens between the pit stops? Well, mainly trying to stay cool, and we get some amazing food that's brought in for us when it's time to eat. You never know when a car may come in for a flat spotted tire or a broken suspension piece or something like that, though, outside of the normal scheduled stops. So we actually had a situation where a car was in the garage getting a quick repair by the mechanics, and another one of our cars came coasting up to the wall, and it was just fueled, so it had no indication of needing anything anytime soon. So we went over the wall, tried to solve the electrical issue and get it back out there on the track, but unfortunately it wasn't something we could fix right there, and it ended that car's race. So the moral of the story is always be ready, because you never know what could happen next. So these cars are absolutely amazing and really fun to work on. Some of the technology used on them, while it resembles what's used on production cars, is really far removed and suited only for the track. So the car starts its life on the assembly line when the main unibody is plucked before a VIN is assigned, then it gets turned into a race car. But from the firewall to the trunk is actually just a stitch welded version of an as-delivered RS3. The engine's a sealed Volkswagen Audi Group 2-liter direct inject turbocharged unit, and it generates about 350 horsepower at the crankshaft. And coupled to the engine is either a sequential transaxle or a version of the DSG dual clutch transaxle, which is what Hammer runs in all three cars. If you've never had the chance to drive a direct shift gearbox or one of the derivatives, I highly recommend you do. It really is a game changer. I've never been an automatic transmission person, but I mean, this is kind of in a realm of its own. I've been fortunate enough to drive a few cars with the DSG transaxles, Audi S4, GTI, and a GT2 RS Porsche with the PDK transaxle. The gear shifts are lightning quick as it goes back and forth between the gear stacks and the dual clutch setup. It's really quite interesting. When you look at how a standard manual transmission works, when you go to shift a gear, now let's just look at a standard gear change here. You remove power, push the clutch in, disconnect the drivetrain, move the gear shifter, which is moving the shift fork, which engages the synchro for the next gear, and then you're letting the clutch out, reconnecting the drivetrain, and reapplying power. So you're off the power for, I mean, a significant amount of time when you break it down and look at it and compared to a DSG box, which is in first and second gear at the same time and just changes between them by applying from one output shaft to the other through its dual clutches, and can switch back and forth. So it's already done the gear change portion. It just cuts power for the briefest of time to go back and forth between the clutch stacks or the gear stacks and change gears. When you downshift, it'll auto blip for you. It's really an amazing piece of technology and highly recommended. It is a game changer to drive. One of my favorite pieces of tech, though, is what's just outside the transaxle. So attached to the transaxle is an adjustable lockup differential. When you look at it, it basically looks like a Haldex coupling unit, but it's running between the front axles. So if you open up the transaxle and take a look at what's inside, coming out of the right side spider gear is what looks to be standard enough output shaft, and that's attached to a cup, which is what the axle's then bolted to. And you look at it, it's built in the typical VW style that they've been using for, well, ever. So what's unique, though, is there's a pump there that builds pressure and applies a set of clutches which will lock this inner shaft to a second outer shaft. And that outer shaft is splined and is locked into the differential carrier itself. So when you lock those clutches up, you are then forcing that axle to rotate with the differential carrier instead of the spider gear just slipping on the inside of the carrier itself. So this creates a lockup condition on the front axle, and it's selectable by the driver on the fly. I believe there's 3 different settings, and it's adjustable from the steering column, and you can change the differential mode on the fly. So I'm going to throw up a couple pictures here to kind of show how the system works. It's the best diagrams and photos that I could find. They're out of one of the Volkswagen Audi workshop manuals. Alright, starting to get a little long-winded on this video, so let's take a look at one more pit stop. This one's going to have a little bit more to it. So we're going to do fuel on this one, and then you're also going to get to see driver change, and we're going to swap the front tires as well. So here's Fuel Team 2 going over again, and I can promise you this first fuel jug is going to have the fuel nozzle trimmed down just a little bit. You can see in the heat there, it's being pretty sporty to fuel with. So on these fuel jugs, while it looks like they may not be filling that fast, they're actually moving pretty well. We're limited to only having 5 gallons in the jug at a time, and all that fuel has to go through a 1-inch restrictor. So inside that dry brake connector, if you were to pull that off, there's a little plastic 1-inch restrictor that keeps the fuel flowing at a specified rate. So without those, it would go a lot quicker, but we're still moving pretty fast with what we have to work with inside the rule set. So as soon as that last fuel jug pops off and comes back over the wall, you can see Richie flying out there with a nitrogen line. Once he stabs the car, that's what drops the air jacks and lifts the car up. So you only see the front come up here. The rear comes up as well. Just depends on the pressure, and sometimes you got to give the car a little bit of a wiggle. But really, we're just doing a front tire change, so that's all we need. So we got Corey and Matt up front that are just ripping tires off. You got Brett doing a little bit of cleanup. There's a little bit of oil spray on the windshield. Corey and Matt are just flying here. It's really awesome to see these guys work and tossing tires over the wall and getting this driver back out there and into the action. Thanks a lot for watching. I'm really glad I could share some of my experiences with you. This is a great group of people to work with, and I'm extremely lucky to have met them and get to travel around the country and work on these amazing cars with the team. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the comments below, and I'll do my best to answer them. And if you live near Road Atlanta, we're going to be out there racing in just a couple of weeks, so hopefully I get to see you out there.